And I think that's it. I think we're up and running. Good morning, good evening, good day, wherever you may happen to be. I'm Tad. Good to see you. I'm hoping that I've actually got it right. And this is now daylight savings time. So I'm going to get my hour back when I'm finished. This is vitally important to me. I'm obsessed with the whole concept that one night a year, I get my hour back. I didn't want to give it up in the first place. I fought like hell. I sat there on whatever the hell that was, the spring equinox, and just clung to that baby, and they ripped it right out of my hands, and they made me spring forward against my will. But tonight this morning, I get my hour back. By God, and I'm going to keep it. Anyway, hello. Good to see you. I'm trying to think about what I have to talk about. I'm in the last waning moments of Navigator's Children. I wake up in the middle of the night, nightmarishly screaming, "Closure, closure," because there's so many plot lines that I'm finishing off at the moment, or trying to. What else is going on? Just got all kinds of weird struggle and stuff, but nothing that anybody particularly needs to know about. I just finished signing a whole bunch of what are called tip-in sheets, which are the sheets that, like for instance, with the recent Tail Chaser and upcoming Dragonbone chair, that they're doing a special edition, beautiful special edition coming from my friend Sean. They send you out a bunch of pages, and you sign the pages, but they're just in a stack. And you sign the pages, and then they tip them into the book when the book is bound. And similarly, I just did a bunch for a reissue of Mervyn Peake's Gormenghast books, for which they're using my introduction. I did not write Gormenghast, but they're using my introduction, along with a Michael Moorcock introduction, and I believe a China Mieville introduction. China and Mike Moorcock, of course, both wonderful writers. And I haven't read either of their introductions, but of course I'm a big Mervyn Peake fan, big Gormenghast fan, so I'm looking forward to that. But anyway, so I was sitting there with my poor sore wrist signing, and they had sent out, this is the Gormenghast books, they had sent out something ahead of time saying, and be sure to not to sign on anybody else's, into anybody else's space, because there's like space for about 8 contributors to sign on the tip-in sheet. And me being me, I don't know, some of you have seen my signature, and it's large and sprawly. It sprawls. It's just like, it's wild and free. What can I say? My signature is a free-range signature that yearns for the open spaces. So I just like trying to get my name all tiny so it fits in here, and so I don't interfere with anybody else's signing space. And as a result, my wrist hurts even more than it would have just from signing many hundreds of pages. But that's not really that much to complain about. Not really. So what else? What else has been going on? Just, God, just the usual stuff. Just the stresses and strains of everyday life. I'm actually super grateful to have books to work on, because at times of stress, which the last 6 months, 8 months, whatever, have definitely been times of stress, it's really nice to have a place that I can go to where I've already put in a lot of work. It's like having a garden or something, which is probably why I use that as a metaphor in the Otherland books. It's like having a garden that you can just get rid of all your other thoughts, your extraneous worries and concerns and all that stuff, and just go work in your garden. And for me, a book is very much like that, especially something as complicated and multi-layered, I guess, as this current set of Ostenard books, because as I've said before, not only do they have to be self-referential within this sprawling 4-book series, but they also have to be self-referential to the initial series, beginning with the Dragonbone chair and all the short fiction that's come after it. And I'm actually trying to tie up some loose ends from, both the first set of books and, the short stuff that I've written since then, and including The Burning Man, which is a kind of novella length, and various other things. So it's been really interesting. And in that sense, as I said, it's a very nice place to go when I'm feeling stressed out about everything else happening in life. Just to give you a minor example, minor stress. This is not the stuff that worries me. This is just the kind of the icing on the cake, the worm in the eclair. I think I talked at some length last week about literally having to tape up my car with duct tape because there had been so much damage done in the last few weeks to various parts of the front end of it. And so because we still have to drive back and forth over the hill all the time to go stay with my dad, I literally had to get down on my hands and knees and crawl around the front of the car, putting duct tape, very carefully and pressing it down very firmly and making sure all the pieces were held in as structurally, useful a way as possible. I mean, I spent like an hour and a half doing this. This was not like, throwing a couple of pieces of tape on something. I was getting in there like an engineer, making sure that everything was as safe as possible so that when my lovely wife was driving out over the hill on Highway 17, she would not be, seeing like the front of the car, the undercarriage suddenly blow off and roll away or something like that. So anyway, I spent this very long time doing this and did a very nice job, I have to say. And it lasted through a trip over the hill and back with no problem. And it looked fine and you could hardly see it and, all of this stuff. And then the day after I got back from the last trip over the hill, our oldest child had to go out to a job interview. And he came back that night and said, the front of the car is all messed up. And I went, wait a minute, are you talking about the tape? And he's like, no, it's like falling off. And I went, oh my God. And I went out and looked at it. And it turned out that he had, as he was leaving our house in a hurry, of course, because leaving late, of course, we have these like two large rocks just to one side of our gate. And somehow, I don't know, it's the wrong side of where you would back out. But somehow he managed to back out over this giant rock, which, I swear to God, I couldn't pick this thing up with a tractor. This is like a gigantic rock. Somehow he managed to go backward over it with the middle of the car. I just cannot figure it out. And ripped the whole thing loose. And he was saying, yeah, but it's okay, I fixed it. And he'd at the place where he did the job interview, he borrowed some like packing tape stuff and like stuck a couple pieces on to hold it together. And I got back all right. But I'm just looking at it and I'm going, that did not just fall off. This has clearly been ripped off by some pretty serious force. It's like, yeah, well, I think I caught it a little bit on that rock over. And I swear to God, the rock is like, it's gigantic. It's like the size of a 1960s living room television. It's gigantic. It is not a little tiny thing. And I just looked at it and I said, whatever. And then the next day I went out and because it had been raining when he came back and told me this. I was damned if I was going to squat in the driveway in the rain and try to fix it. But I went out the next day and retaped it all over again. I had to take off the packing tape that he'd put on it, which was a hideous light color that didn't go with the rest of my tape job at all. Anyway, so just to give you an idea of the kinds of, these are the small things. These are the tiny things that add to my joy in life and make me extremely grateful that I have a complicated story that I can retreat to. Not unlike, a traveler in a mountain storm finding one of those lovely little cabins that they put up in the Alps and places like that where you can take refuge if you get caught in a blizzard. That's how my books are for me, and they believe me, it's been doing its work because I have needed it. quite a few times and since, during 2022. 2020 sucked. I mean, we all know that. 2020 sucked. 2021, marginally better, but it was still pretty sucky. I mean, let's face it. So 2022 was shaping up to be like back to something normal, a somewhat normal year. And instead, and much of it has been happening to us personally. This is not so much, although there have been a lot of other horrible things that have happened in the world in 2022, but we've had a particularly rough year for a number of reasons I won't bore you with. Obviously, you know about my mom if you've been following me and over the, however long, but just a lot of other stuff too that, as I said, I won't bore you with. So I don't know. I have needed that refuge. I have needed to be able to dive into Ostenard and not come up for several hours in a day. It has probably kept me maybe not sane. Maybe it's too late for that, but it certainly has been keeping me functional. And that's better than nothing. That's all I have to say. Anyway, what else? Was there anything else I needed to say? Not really. Like I said, it's just, the boring stuff is boring. The depressing stuff is depressing. If I think of anything entertaining, I will do my best to tell you. So, being as at the moment nothing entertaining comes to mind, I will check in with the people who have popped in to say hello. So let me do that, and then I will start reading from the Dragonbone chair. So first off the bat is Isaac. Hello, Isaac. Good morning to you. And Kristen. Hello, Kristen. Ty. Good morning from England, says Ty. Good morning to England. Ty, say I. Sarah. Hello, hello. Good to see you. Penny. Nice to see you too. Alan David Clark. Alan, you're one of those people who has 3 first names for a name. And I always have been very impressed by that. Good job. And there is Aaron. Aaron, partner of Isaac. Good to see you. Petra. Yes, hello, Petra. Petra says, good morning from sunny but cold Berlin. And Christina sends her best but can't join this morning. For shame, Christina. For shame. Now, that's okay. This is not mandatory, and that's one of the reasons we record it. So if you miss an episode but want to hear what I read, it's there. And that's thanks to Chris Fab, who has been really good about putting these things up, and for which I'm very grateful. But also, obviously, I've got them on my Facebook page and my Twitter page as well. Anyway, Wouter says, good evening, good day. It's 9 o'clock here, so for once, Iris and I take the luxury of listening before getting up. By the way, Tad, you asked me again to increase the volume. It's currently much lower than in older episodes. Okay, I've cranked it up a little bit. I don't know how much control I have over it. Let me see. Hello, okay. That seems to be taking it the wrong direction. Let's see. All right. Let's see. All right. Somebody can tell me if that's too loud now. I've definitely cranked it up a little bit. Let me see who else is here while people let me know how the sound is. Mark, good morning. Good to see you. And then other people are saying hello to themselves. Ilva, hello, darling. Good to see you too. Hope you're doing well. Suzanne, nearly forgot. It's 8 a.m. in Misty, Yorkshire, says Suzanne. I can't argue with you. It almost certainly is. Jeremy, hello, hello. Can't think of anything interesting to say. Neither can I, but at least you're not sitting in front of a webcam and trying to say something interesting, which I am. Let's see who else we got here. Tracy, hello, hello. Yes, thank you. Tracy says, very glad you have this garden. I would be really much... I struggle sometimes to not freak out. As I think I've mentioned to you, my mom, who I miss very much, was one of the world's champion warriors. And whether by nature or nurture, she definitely passed that along to me. So I am somebody who's constantly worrying. Now, it has a good side, and the good side is that I actually am one of those people who remembers to check the oven to make sure it's off when you go out, and who locks the door at night, and, you know, all that kind of stuff, right? I have a very active, what's the word I'm looking for? A loop closing mechanism that says, have you done this? Have you done that? It also obviously comes in very handy when you're writing really complicated books or doing very complicated world building, you know, that there's that little loop circuit that closes and says, yes, but what if this? Did you check this? Have you made sense out of that? So, but unfortunately, the negative side of that is that you're constantly thinking of like, well, if this happened, you know, if a weather balloon fell out of the sky and landed on our electrical cables that bring power to the house, then that could set the trees on fire. And, you know, then what would we do? And blah, blah, you know, I mean, you think of these like crazy ass things. So, it's very good. It's good for everybody around me that I have a place to retreat to where I can put my worries aside and worry on behalf of my characters for a change, instead of worrying on behalf of my poor family and friends who otherwise would be the recipients of all kinds of panicked emails saying things like, oh my God, I hope you've given your dog his heartworm medication this month, and stuff like that. Anyway, let's see who else is here. Suzanne says, oh, Suzanne has been through a similar experience. Suzanne says, I was lying on the pavement pulling off a dangling bit from the front of my car, so now I'm worried the front of my car isn't held together very well and could fall apart. I'll try duct tape. Hey, duct tape is great. I actually used Gorilla Tape, and it's a different brand, but that seems to work pretty well too. But what you do need is you need really sticky tape that's got horizontal fibers and probably vertical fibers too. But the main thing is you have to have those crossing over fibers, because that stuff keeps them from stretching very much, whereas and tearing. So give it a shot. And, you know, plus it's kind of interesting. You know, it's interesting to figure out how all those little dangly bits on your car actually fit together. Maybe I'll duct tape the house next. Voucher comments on the aesthetics of car taping. Hey, maybe it's a whole new field of endeavor. Maybe I'm a pioneer. Holger says, good morning, lovely people here. And which probably includes me out, but I'm very willing to have Holger say hello to the rest of you. Alan David Clark has a bone scan and CT scan to look forward to tomorrow. I am thinking good thoughts for you, Alan, and I'm sure that it will be a good thing to do, and we will send I'll send my strongest California vibes for good results. That I'm not a thoughts and prayers guy. I mean, like thoughts, yeah, but I'm remarkably non-religious, so I'm a Californian, so I can send vibes, good vibes, and I'm sending them in your direction. Jonathan from Atlantic, Canada. Hello, Jonathan. Nice to check in. Zoe is your last name, S-Z-O. Very cool. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Zoe or So, one of the two, since there's two consonants at the beginning. Rosalba, good morning. There's Chris. Hello, Chris, and thanks again for all your work. James, haven't been feeling so hot, but he's surviving. Well, I'm glad you're surviving, James, because the alternative is dreadful, and I forbid you to participate in the alternative. So continue to survive, take good care of yourself. You're an important person, and continue to hang out. So good to see you. Becky says, books and reading help keep her functional too. Excellent. And let me see, who else have I said hello to yet? Andre! Hello, Andre. Checking in from Barcelona. Lovely place. I got very sick there, unfortunately, the last time I was there, and had to leave a few days before we had planned to. I got strep throat, and fortunately I speak Spanish, although not Catalonian, but I do speak Spanish, so I was able to get to an emergency room in Barcelona and get some help. But before that happened, I had a wonderful time in Barcelona. We went to the Joan Miró Museum and, the Sagrada Familia and ran around on Las Ramblas and did all the touristy stuff, and it was good. Let me see what else. Who else is here? You, Julian or Julian. And again, I don't know whether it's the German pronunciation or not, but I will say Julian, and Julian can correct me if I'm wrong. Who else have I not said hello to yet? This is all the same people talking to each other mostly. Sound is staticky now. Okay, well, let's try and turn that down a little bit. How's that? That better? I hope so. We're trying to find an evening, we're trying to find a happy medium here. So let me know. Anybody can hear that if that's better. If the sound is better. I think what's happening is if it gets too high up into the upper end, still a Dalek. If it gets too high up into the upper end, I think it, okay, let's check that out here. Why is that down so low? Okay. Still awful, still static. I can't hear it myself. Let me see if I can get a feeling for what's going on here. Maybe I can make some adjustments. And then I gotta read, guys. I'm running out of time here. It's gonna get late into the show if I don't get it done soon. Okay, here we go. No, I'm getting this directly through the system, so I'm not getting static here. I can't tell if there's static on this thing or not. Okay, well, let's see what we've got here. The problem is that the broadcast, and now saying sorry they can't hear. Lord, my Lord. Can you turn the volume off and on again? I can mute and unmute. It's only there when I talk. That just sounds like it's up too loud. Okay. How's that? That's about the best I can do. No, it's even worse. Somebody says. Just want to read. I hate all this stuff. Okay. Not better. No, it's worse. Oi. Bad, says Petra. Well, I should never have started messing with it in the first place. Oh God. I don't know why. I changed it back to what it was. There shouldn't be that wiggle chords. Okay. All right, hang on. Let me try something. Let me try something. Here. No, that won't work. No, I have to have at least 2 slots. Hang on. Okay, is that any better? Somebody let me know. Oh, the struggle. There's an echo going on. There shouldn't be an echo. There's nothing else open. Yes, better? Okay. All right. Yeah, I unplugged it out of one thing. Unfortunately, one of the curses of having a fairly new Macintosh, which is what I got, in part because I was having problems with other things before with the broadcast. So I decided, well, I've had my computer now for years and years. I guess I can check in. I can get a new one. Unfortunately now, as those of you who are Apple users know, Apple has essentially jettisoned the old USB connection. So I have my microphones and I have more than one microphone, but I only use one at a time, so don't think that that's somehow the problem. But my microphones and my webcam and virtually every other piece of equipment that I have has an old line USB connector, which no longer connects directly to the Macintosh. So either I'm going to have to go out and invest, instead of getting more duct tape from my car, my next big home purchase is going to have to be, all new microphones and webcams and stuff like that. Or what I do now, which is adapters. And I suspect that some of these adapters need to be replaced also. So we'll see if I can find a better class of adapter. Anyway. All right, so now we're going to read. Now that I've wasted most of the show, I am going to read. So I am reading, as you know, from the Dragonbone chair. We are beginning chapter 28, Drums of Ice. The morning sun of the 24th day of Maya month beamed down on Hernus Adhark, turning the golden disk atop the highest of the Tag's roofs into a circlet of brilliant flame. The sky was blue as an enamel plate, as though Brynioch of the skies had chased the clouds away with his heavenly hazel stick, leaving them to lurk suddenly. God bless. The sky was blue as an enamel plate, as though Brynioch of the skies had chased the clouds away with his heavenly hazel stick, leaving them to lurk sullenly around the upper peaks of the looming Grinspog. The sudden return of spring should have gladdened Megwin's heart. All over Hernesteer, the untimely rains and cruel frosts had drawn a shroud over both the land and her father Luth's people. Flowers had frozen in the ground unborn. Apples had dropped small and sour from the gnarled branches in the orchards. The sheep and cows put out to graze in sodden fields came back with rolling, frightened eyes, unnerved by hailstones and gusting winds. A blackbird, insolently waiting until the last moment, hopped up from Megwin's path into the denuded branches of a cherry tree, where he trilled disputatiously. Megwin paid him no heed, but hitched up her long dress and hurried toward her father's hall. She ignored the voice calling her name at first, unwilling to be hindered in her errand. Finally, reluctantly, she turned to see her half-brother Gwithin running toward her. She stopped and waited for him, arms folded. Gwithin's white tunic was disordered, and his golden neck torque had ridden halfway around to the back, as though he were a child instead of a young man of warrior age. He caught up and stood, panting. She gave a snort of dismay and set to straightening out his garments. The prince smirked, but waited patiently while she pulled the torque around to lie against his collarbone. His long brown mane of hair had largely pulled free of the red cloth, holding it in a careless horsetail. As she reached around to tie it, their faces were eye to eye, although Gwithin was by no means a short man. Megwin scowled. "Bagba's heard, Gwithin. Look at you. You must do better. You will be king some day." "And what has being king to do with how my hair's worn? Besides, I was handsome enough when I started out, but I had to run like the very wind to catch you with those long legs." Megwin flushed as she turned away. Her height was something about which, try as she might, she could not be matter-of-fact. "Well, you've caught me up now. Are you going to the hall?" "I certainly am." A sterner expression ran across Gwithin's face like quicksilver, and he tugged at his long mustache. "I have things I must say to our father." "As do I." Megwin nodded, walking now. Their strides and heights, so evenly matched, their sorrel-colored hair so alike it might have been spun from one wheel. Any outsider would have guessed they were twins, instead of Megwin 5 years older, and from a different mother. "Our best brood sow, Agenwy, died evening last. Another one, Gwithin. What is happening? Is it another plague like at Abengate?" "If it is a plague," her brother said grimly, fingering the leather-wrapped hilt of his sword, "I know who brought it here. That man is a sickness on legs." He slapped the pommel and spat. I only pray that he speaks out of turn today. Brynioch, would I love to cross blades with that one. Megwin narrowed her eyes. Don't be a fool, she said crossly. Guthwolf has killed 100 men, and strange as it may seem, he is a guest at the Tag. A guest who insults my father, Gwithin snarled, pulling his elbow from Megwin's gentle prisoning grasp. A guest who brings threats from a high king, drowning in his own poor kingship. A king who struts and bullies and spends golden coins like they were pebbles, and turns to Hernistir and demands we help him. Gwithin's voice was rising, and his sister darted a glance around, worried who might hear. There was no one in sight but the pale shapes of the door guards 100 paces away. Where was King Elias when we lost the road to Narvin and Elvritsala? When bandits and the gods know what else descended on the Frostmarch road? Face flushed again, the prince looked up to find Megwin no longer at his side. He turned to see her standing, arms folded, 10 steps behind. Have you finished, Gwithin? She asked. He nodded, but his mouth was tight. Good, then. The difference between our father and yourself, fellow, is more than only 30-some years. In those years, he has learned when to speak and when to keep his thoughts inside. That is why, thanks to him, someday you stand to be King Gwithin and not just the Duke of Hernistir Duchy. Gwithin stared for a long moment. I know, he said at last. You would have me be like Aelair and bow and scrape to the dogs of Erkenland. I know you think Aelair is the sun and moon, regarding not what he thinks of you, king's daughter though you be. But I am not such a man. We are Hernistiri. We crawl for no one. Megwin glared, stung by the jab over her feelings for the Count of Nad Mulach, about whom Gwithin was exactly right. The attention he showed her was only that due to a king's gawky, unmarried daughter. But the tears she dreaded did not come. Instead, as she looked at Gwithin, his handsome face twisted by frustration, by pride, and not least by genuine love of his people and land, she saw again the little brother she had once carried on her shoulder, and whom she herself had from time to time teased into tears. Why are we fighting, Gwithin? She asked wearily. What has brought this shadow down on our house? Her brother lowered his gaze to his boot tops, embarrassed, then extended his hand. Friends and allies, he said. Come, let us go in and see father before the Earl of Utniate comes slinking in to bid fond farewells. The windows of the Tag's great hall were thrown open. The sunlight, streaming through, was full of sparkling dust from the rushes spread across the floor. The thick wall timbers, hewed from the oak trees of the Kirkcoil, were fitted so carefully that not a gleam of light showed between them. Up among the roof beams hung 1,000 painted carvings of the gods of the Hernistiri, of heroes and monsters, all twisting slowly in the rafters as reflected light shone warmly on their polished wooden features. At the hall's far end, sun splashing in on either side, King Luth Ufluthin sat in his huge oaken chair beneath the carved stag's head that strained upward from the chair's back, antlers of real horn fixed to its wooden skull. The king was eating a bowl of porridge and honey with a bone spoon, while Inawin, his young wife, sat on a lower chair at his side, putting a tracery of delicate stitching onto the hem of one of Luth's robes. As the sentries banged their spear points twice upon their shields to signal Gwithin's arrival, lesser nobility, such as Count Aelair, received only a single beat, while the king himself received 3, and Megwin not a 1. Luth looked up and smiled. placing his bowl down on the arm of his chair and wiping his grey mustache on his sleeve. Inawin saw the gesture and gave Megwin a despairing, woman-to-woman look that Luth's daughter resented more than a little. Megwin had never really gotten used to Gwydden's mother, Fiafna, taking the place of her own. Megwin's mother, Penemwe, had died when Megwin was 4. But at least Fiafna had been Luth's age, not a mere girl like Inawin. Still, this young golden-haired woman was good-hearted, although perhaps a little slow of wit. It was not really Inawin's fault. She was a third wife. "Gwydden!" Luth half rose, brushing crumbs from the lap of his belted yellow robe. "Are we not lucky to have the sun today?" The king swept a hand windowward, as pleased as a child who has learned a trick. "It is a certain thing that we need a little, eh? And perhaps it will help to put our guests from Erkenland." He made a wry face, his mobile, clever features shifting into a look of bemusement, eyebrows arching above the thick, crooked nose broken in his boyhood. "To put them in a more agreeable mood. Do you think?" "No, I do not think that, father," Gwydden said, approaching as the king settled back into his antler-crested seat. "And I hope the answer you give them today, if I may presume, will send them away in an even fouler one." He pulled up a stool and sat at the king's feet just below the raised platform, sending a harper scuttling. "One of Guthwolf's soldiers picked a fight with old Cravan last evening. I had a hard time preventing Cravan from feathering the bastard's back with an arrow." Luth looked troubled for a moment. Then the look was gone, hidden behind the smiling mask that Megwin knew so well. "Ah, father," she thought, "even you were finding it a bit hard to keep the music playing while these creatures bay all around the Teg." She walked quietly forward and sat on the platform by Gwydden's stool. "Well," the king grinned ruefully, "sure it is that King Elias could have chosen his diplomats with a bit more care. But today, in an hour, they are gone, and peace descends again on Hernsad-Hark." Luth snapped his fingers, and a serving boy sprang forward to take his dish of porridge away. Inawin watched it critically as it went by. "There," she said reproachfully, "you didn't finish again. What am I to do with your father?" she added, this time directing her gaze to Megwin, smiling fondly as though Megwin too was a soldier in the constant battle to make Luth finish his meals. Megwin, still at a loss as to how to deal with a mother a year younger than herself, hastily broke the silence. "Eigen we died, father, our best, and the 10th sow this month, and some of the others have gotten very thin." The king frowned. "This cursed weather. If Elias could but keep the spring sun overhead, I'd give him any tax he asked." He reached down to pat Megwin's arm, but was not quite able to reach. "All we can do is pile more rushes in the barns to keep out the chill. Failing that, we are in the godly hands of Brynjolf and Mircha." There was another metallic clash of spear on shield, and the door speaker appeared, hands nervously clasped. "Your Highness," he called, "the Earl of Oatengate requests an audience." Luth smiled. "Our guests have decided to say farewell before they take to their horses. Of course, please bring Earl Guthwolf in immediately." But their guest, followed by several of his armored but unsworded men, was already moving past the ancient servant. Guthwolf dropped slowly to his knee 5 paces before the platform. "Your Majesty? Ah, and the prince as well. I am fortunate." There was no hint of mockery in his voice, but his green eyes held an unsubtle fire. "And Princess Megwin," a smile, "the rose of Hernesad-Hark." Megwin struggled to maintain her composure. "Sir, there was only one rose of Hernesad-Hark, she said. And since she was the mother of your king Elias, I'm surprised it should slip your mind. Guthwolf nodded gravely. Of course, lady, I sought only to pay a compliment. But I must take exception to your calling Elias my king. Is he not yours too, under the high ward? Gwydden shifted on his stool, turning to see what his father's reaction would be. His scabbard scraped on the wooden platform. Of course, of course. Luth waved his hand slowly, as if beneath deep water. We have been through all this, and I see no need to belabor it. I recognize the debt of my house to King John. We have always honored it in peace or war. Yes. The Earl of Utniate stood, dusting the knees of his breeches. But what about your house's debt to King Elias? He has shown great tolerance. Inawan stood up, and the robe she had been sewing slid to the floor. You must excuse me, she said breathlessly, plucking the garment up. There are things in the household I should attend to. The king waved his permission, and she walked quickly but carefully between the waiting men and slid out the half-open door of the hall as lithely as a doe. Luth breathed a quiet sigh. Megwin looked at him, seeing the always surprising lines of age that wreathed her father's face. He's tired, and she, Inawan, is frightened, Megwin thought. I wonder what I am? Angry? I'm not sure. Exhausted, really. As the king stared at Elias's messenger, the room seemed to darken. For a moment, Megwin feared that clouds had covered the sun, that the winter was returning. Then she realized it was only her own apprehension, her sudden feeling that something more than her father's peace of mind hung in the balance here. Guthwolf, the king began, and his voice sounded bowed as though beneath a great weight. Do not think to provoke me today, but neither think that you can cow me. The king has shown no tolerance for the troubles of the Hernestiri at all. We have weathered a bitter drought, and now the rains for which we thanked all the gods 1,000 times have themselves become a curse. What penalty that Elias can threaten me with can exceed that of seeing my people frightened or cattle starving? I can pay no greater tithe. The Earl of Utniate stood silently for a moment, and the blankness of his expression slowly hardened into something that, to Megwin, looked unsettlingly like jubilation. No greater penalty, the Earl said, savoring each word as though it felt good on his tongue. No greater tithe? He spat a wad of citral juice on the ground before the king's chair. Several of Luth's men-at-arms actually cried out in horror. The harper, who had been quietly playing in the corner, dropped his instrument with a discordant crash. Dog! Gwydden leaped up, his stool clattering away. In a flashing moment, his sword was out and at Guthwolf's throat. The Earl only stared, his chin tipped ever so slightly back. Gwydden! Luth barked. Sheathe, damn you, sheathe! Gwydden's lip curled. Guthwolf's lip curled. Let him. Go ahead, pup. Kill the High King's hand, unarmed. There was a clanking by the door as some of his men, their astonishment thawing, started to move forward. Guthwolf's hand shot up. No, even if this whelp should slit my weason from ear to ear, no one shall strike back. You walk out and ride to Erkenland. King Elias will be most interested. His men, confused, stood in place like armored scarecrows. Let him go, Gwydden, Luth said, cold anger in his voice. The prince, face flushed, glared at the Erkenlander for a long moment, then dropped his blade back to his side. Guthwolf passed a finger over the tiny cut on his throat, and gazed coolly at his own blood. Megwin realized she had been holding her breath. At the sight of the crimson smear on the Earl's fingertip, she let it whistle out again. "You will live to tell Elias yourself, Otenyate." Only a slight tremor disturbed the evenness of the king's tone. "I hope you will tell him as well the mortal insult you have paid to the house of Herne, an insult that would have gained your death had you not been Elias's emissary and the king's hand. Go." Guthwolf turned and walked to where his men stood, wild-eyed. When he reached them, he pivoted on one heel, facing Luth across the expanse of the great hall. "Remember that you could think of no greater tithe you could pay," he said. "If someday you hear fire in the beams of the Teg and your children crying." He strode heavily through the door. Megwin, her hands shaking, bent and picked up a piece of the shattered harp and wound its curling strings around her hand. She raised her head to look at her father and brother. What she saw there made her turn back again to the shard of wood in her palm and the string pulled tight against her white skin. Breathing a soft Ranaman curse, Tiamak stared disconsolately at the empty cage of reeds. It was his third trap, and there had not been a crab yet. The fish head that had baited it was, of course, gone without trace. Glaring down into the muddy water, he had a sudden nervous premonition that the crabs were somehow a step ahead of him, or perhaps even now waiting for him to drop a cage down, lardered with another pop-eyed head. He could picture a whole tribe of them scuttling over with expressions of glee to poke the bait out through the bars with a stick or some other such tool recently granted to crab kind by some beneficent crustacean deity. Did the crabs worship him as a soft-shelled providing angel, he wondered? Or did they look up at him with the cynical indifference of a gang of ne'er-do-wells taking the measure of a drunkard before relieving him of his purse? He felt sure it was the latter. He rebaited the carefully woven cage and, with a soft sigh, let it splash down into the water, uncoiling its rope behind as it sank. The sun was just slipping below the horizon, washing the long sky above the marsh in shades of orange and persimmon red. As Tiamak poled his flatboat through the Rand's waterways, distinguishable in places from the land only by the lesser height of the vegetation, he had a sinking feeling that today's ill luck was only the beginning of a long rising tide. He had broken his best bowl that morning, the one that he had spent 2 days writing Roahog the potter's ancestor list to pay for. In the afternoon he had shattered a pen nib and spattered a great gobbet of berry juice ink across his manuscript, ruining an almost completed page. And now, unless the crabs had decided to hold some kind of festival in the cramped confines of his last trap, there was going to be precious little to eat tonight. He was growing so very tired of root soup and rice biscuits. As he silently approached the last float, a lattice-work ball of reeds, he offered an unspoken prayer to He who always steps on sand, that even now the little bottom walkers were pushing and shoving their way into the cage below. Because of his unusual education, which included a year living on Perdruin, unheard of for a Ranaman, Tiamak did not really believe in He who steps on sand any more, but he still held a fondness for him, such as might be felt for a senile grandfather who often tumbled down from the house, but once brought nuts and carved toys. Besides, it never hurt to pray, even if one did not believe entirely in the object of prayer. It helped to compose the mind, and at the very least it impressed others. The trap came up slowly, and for a moment Tiamak's heart sped a little in his thin brown chest as if seeking to drown out the expectant noises of his stomach. But the sensation of resistance was short-lived. Probably some clinging root which had held and then slipped away, and the cage suddenly popped up and bobbed on the water's cloudy surface. Something was moving inside. He lifted the cage up, interposing it between himself and the sunset glaring sky, squinting. Two tiny stalked eyes goggled back at him, eyes that wobbled atop a crab that would disappear in his palm if he folded his fingers over it. Tiamat snorted. He could imagine what had happened here. The older, rowdier crab brothers goading the littlest into assaying the trap. The youngling caught inside, weeping, while his crude brothers laughed and waved their claws. Then the giant shadow of Tiamat. The cage suddenly tugged upward, the crab brothers staring abashedly at each other, wondering how they would explain baby's absence to mother. Still, Tiamat thought, considering the hollowish feeling in his middle, if this was all he had to show for today, it was small, but it would go nicely in the soup. He squinted into the cage again, then upended it, shaking the prisoner out onto his palm. Why delude himself? This was a run-on-the-sandbar day, and that was that. The crablet made a plopping noise as he dropped it back into the water. He did not even bother to re-sink the trap. As he climbed the long ladder from his moored boat to the little house perched in the banyan tree, Tiamat vowed to be content with soup and a biscuit. Gluttony was an obstacle, he reminded himself, an impediment between the soul and the realms of truth. As he reeled the ladder up onto the porch, he thought of she who birthed mankind, who had not even had a nice bowl of root soup, but had subsisted entirely on rocks and dirt and swamp water until they combined in her stomach, and she whelped a litter of clay men, the first humans. There, that made root soup a real bargain, didn't it? Besides, he had much work to do anyway. Repair or rewrite the blotched manuscript page, for one thing. Among his tribesmen, he was thought of as merely strange, but somewhere, out in the world, there would be people who would read his revision of Sovereign Remedies of the Rana Healers and realize that there were mines of true learning in the marshes. But, a crab would have gone down smartly. That and a jug of fern beer. As Tiamat washed his hands in the water bowl he had put out before leaving, crouching because there was no room to sit between his obsessively scraped and polished writing board and his water jug, he heard a scratching sound on the roof. He listened carefully as he wiped his hands dry on his waistcloth. It came again, a dry rustle like his broken pen being rubbed across the thatching. It took him only a moment to slide out the window and climb hand over hand onto the sloping roof. Grasping one of the banyan's long curving limbs, he made his way up to where a little bark-roofed box sat atop the roof peak, an infant house carried on its mother's back. He ducked his head into the box's open end. It was there, right enough, a gray sparrow pecking briskly at the seeds that were scattered across the floor. Tiamat reached in a gentle hand to enfold it. Then, as carefully as he could, he climbed down the roof and slid in through the window. He put the sparrow in the crab cage he kept hanging from the roof beam for just such occasions, and quickly made a fire. When the flames began to lick up from the stone hearth, he removed the bird from the cage, his eyes smarting as the smoke began to coil toward the hole in the ceiling. The sparrow had lost a feather or two from its tail and held one wing out a bit from its side, as though it had come through some scrapes on its way down from Erkenland. He knew it had come from Erkenland, because it was the only sparrow he had ever raised. His other birds were marsh doves, but Morgenes insisted on sparrows for some reason. Funny old man he was. After he had set a pot of water on the flames, Tiamat did what he could for the awkward silver wing, and put down more seeds in a hollow curl of bark full of water. He was tempted to wait until he had eaten to read the message, to hold off the pleasure of faraway news as long as possible. But on a day like this one had been, such patience was too much to expect of himself. He mashed some rice flour up in the mortar, added some pepper and water, then spread the mixture out and rolled it into a cake, which he set on the firestone to bake. The slip of parchment that had been wrapped around the sparrow's leg was ragged at the edges, and the printed characters were smeared as though the bird had gotten more than a little wet, but he was used to such things and soon sorted it out. The notation signifying the date when it had been written surprised him. The gray sparrow had taken nearly a month to reach the Ran. The message surprised him even more, but it was not the kind of surprise he had been hoping for. It was with a feeling of cold weight in his stomach, superseding any hunger, that he went to the window, looking out past the tangled banyan branches to the fast-blooming stars. He stared into the northern sky and, for a moment, could almost believe he felt a cold wind knifing in, driving a wedge of chill through the warm air of the Ran. He was a long time at the window before he noticed the smell of his supper burning. Oh, and we're almost out of time and still have several pages. I'm going to read past the top of the hour here and try and finish this chapter. So just so you know, I've got about 3 pages left, so it'll be 10 or 15 minutes since I started late. Count Aelair sat back in the deep cushioned chair and looked up at the high ceiling. It was covered in religious paintings, painstaking renditions of Eucyrus healing the washerwoman, Sutrin martyred in the arena of the Imperator Crexus, and other such subjects. The colors seemed to be fading somewhat, and many of the pictures were obscured by dust as though draped in a fine veil. Still, it was an impressive sight, for all that this was one of the smaller antechambers of the Sancellan Adenitis. A million weight of sandstone, marble, and gold, Aelair thought, and all for a monument to something no one has ever seen. Unbidden, a wave of homesickness washed over him, as had often happened in this last week. What he would not give to be back in his humble hall in Nad Mullah, surrounded by nieces and nephews and the small monuments of his own people and gods, or at the Tag in Hernus Adharc, where a bit of his secret heart always lingered, instead of surrounded here by the land-devouring stone of Naban. But the scent of war was on the wind, and he could not lock himself away when his king had asked for help. Still, he was weary of traveling. The grass of Hernistir would feel fine beneath his horse's hooves again. Count Aelair, forgive me, please, for keeping you waiting. Father Denivan, the elector's young secretary, stood in the far doorway, wiping his hands on his black robe. Today has been a full one already, and we have not reached the forenoon. Still, he laughed, that is a terribly poor excuse. Please, come into my chambers. Aelair followed him out of the antechamber, his boots silent on the old, thick carpets. There, said Denivan, grinning and warming his hands before the fire. Is that better? It is a scandal, but we cannot keep the Lord's greatest house warm. The ceilings are too high, and it has been such a cold spring. The Count smiled. Truth to tell, I had not much noticed it. In Hernistir, we sleep with our windows open, except in direst winter. We are a people who live out of doors. Denivan wagged his eyebrows. And we, Nabanai, are soft southerners, eh? I did not say that. One thing you southerners are, you are masters of clever speech. Denivan sat down in a hard-backed chair. Ah, but his sacredness the lector, who is an Erkenlandish man originally, as you well know, the lector can talk circles around any of us. He is a wise and subtle man. That I know. And it is about him I would speak, Father. Call me Denivens, please. Is ever the fate of a great man's secretary? To be sought out for one's proximity rather than one's personality. He made a mock downcast face. Belair again found himself liking this priest very much. Such indeed is your doom, Denivens. Now here, please. I suppose you know why my master has sent me here. I would have to be a clod indeed not to know. These are times that set tongues wagging like the tails of excited dogs. Your master reaches out to Leobardus that they can make some sort of common cause. Indeed. Belair stepped away from the fire to draw up a chair near Denivens. We are delicately balanced. My Luth, your Lector Renesson, Elias the High King, Duke Leobardus, and Prince Joshua, if he lives, Denivens said as his face was worried. Yes, delicate balance. And you know the Lector can do nothing to upset that balance. Belair nodded slowly. I know. So why have you come to me? Denivens asked kindly. I'm not quite sure. Only this I will tell you. It seems there is some struggle brewing as often happens. But I myself fear it is deeper. You might think me a bad man, but I forebode that an age is ending, and I fear what the coming one may bring. The lector's secretary stared. For a moment, his plain face seemed far older, as though reflected on sorrows long carried. I will say only that shares no fears, Count Belair. He said at last. But I cannot speak for the lector, except to say, as I did before, he is a wise and subtle man. He stroked the tree at his breast. For your heart's ease, I can say this. Duke Leobardus has not yet made up where he will lend his support. Although the High King alternate flatters, threatens him, still Leobardus resists. While this is good news, said Belair, and smiled wearily. When I saw the Duke, he was very distant, as though he feared to be listening to me too closely. He has many ways to weigh, as does my own master. But I know this too, and it's a deep secret. Just this morning, took Baron to see. The Baron sent forth on an embassy that will mean much to both Leobardus and my master, and will have much to do with the way which Rodan might any conflict. I can tell you more than that, but I hope it is something. It is more than a little, Belair said. I thank you for your trust, Denivens. Somewhere in the a bell rang deep and low. The Clavian bell calls out the noon hour. Denivens said. Come, let us find something to end a jug of beer and talk about more pleasant things. A smile chased across his features, making him young again. Did you know? I traveled in Hernesteer. Your country is beautiful, Belair. Although somewhat stone buildings, patting the wall of Denivens' chamber. And that is one of its beauties. The priest laughed, leading him out of the door. The old man's beard was white, and long enough that he tucked it into his belt, which until this morning he had been doing it for several days. His hair was darker than his beard. Even his hooded jacket and leggings were made from the thick felt of a white wolf. The creature's skin had been carefully flayed, the forelegs crossed his chest, and its jawless head nailed to a campfire sat on his own brow. Had it not been for the bits of red crystal empty sockets, and the old man's fierce blue eyes beneath him, he would have been nothing but another patch of white in the snow-covered forest that lay between Drawers Hole and the hills. The moaning of the wind in the treetops increased, and a spatter of snow dropped from the branches of the tall pine tree onto the man crouching below. He shook himself impatiently like an animal. A fine mist rose around, momentarily breaking the weak sunlight into a fog, tiny rainbows. The wind continued its keening song. The old man in white reached to his side, grasping something that at first appeared to be only another lump of light. A snow-covered tree stump. He held it up, brushing the powdery whiteness from its top and sides, then lifted away the cloth cover just far enough to peer inside. He whispered into the opening and waited, then knitted his brows for an instant as if annoyed or troubled. Setting the object down, he stood up and unbuckled the belt of bleached reindeer hide from around his waist. After first pulling the hood back from his lean, leather-hardened face, he stripped off the wolfskin coat. The sleeveless shirt he wore beneath was the same color as the jacket. The skin of his sinewy arms not much darker, but starting on his right wrist, just above the fur gauntlet, the head of a snake was drawn in bright inks, scribed in blue and black and blood red directly on the skin. The body of the snake curved round and round the old man's right arm in a spiral, disappearing into the shoulder of his shirt, to reappear writhing sinuously about his left arm, and terminate in a curlicued tail at the wrist. This fierce splash of color leaped out against the dull winter forest and the man's white garb and skin. From a short distance, it appeared that some flying serpent halved in midair was suffering its death agonies 2 cubits above the frozen earth. The old man paid no attention to the goose flesh on his arms until he had finished draping his jacket over the bundle, tucking the loose folds in beneath it. Then he pulled a leather bag from a pouch in his undershirt, squeezed from it a quantity of yellow grease, and briskly rubbed it over his exposed skin, causing the serpent to gleam as though newly arrived from some humid southern jungle. The task over, he crouched back again on his heels to wait. He was hungry. He had finished the last of his traveling rations the night before. That was of no importance anyway, because soon the ones he waited for would come, and then there would be food. Chin tilted down, cobalt eyes smoldering beneath his icy brows, Yarnauga watched the southern approaches. He was an old man, and the rigors of time and weather had made him hard and spare. In a way, he looked forward to the hour that was coming soon, when death called for him and took him to her dark, quiet hall. Silence and solitude held no terror. They had been the warp and weft of his long life. He wanted only to finish the task that had been set before him, to hand on a torch that others might use in the darkness ahead. Then he would let life and body go as easily as he shrugged the snow from his bare shoulders. Thinking of the solemn halls that waited at the final turn of his road, he remembered his beloved Tungledeer, left behind a fortnight ago. As he had stood upon his doorstep that last day, the little town where he had spent most of his 4.5 score of years had stretched before him, as empty as the legendary Helheim that awaited him when his work was done. All of Tungledeer's other inhabitants had fled months before. Only Yarnauga remained in the village called Moondor, perched among the high Himmelfell mountains, but still in the shadow of distant Stürmerspike, the storm spike. The winter had hardened into a cold that even the Rimmersmen of Tungledeer had never known before, and the nighttime songs of the winds had changed into something that had the sound of howling and weeping in it, until men went mad and were found laughing in the morning, their families dead around them. Only Yarnauga had remained in his small house as the ice mists became thick as wool in the mountain passes and the narrow streets of the town. Tungledur's sloping roofs seemed to float like the ships of ghost warriors sailing the clouds. No one but Yarnauga had been around to see the flickering lights of Stormspike burn brighter and brighter, to hear the sounds of vast, harsh music that wound in and out through the din of thunder, playing across the mountains and valleys of this northernmost province of Rimmersgard. But now even he, his time come around at last, as made known to him by certain signs and messages, had left Tungledur to the creeping darkness and cold. Yarnauga knew that no matter what happened, he would never again see the sun on the wooden houses, or listen to the singing of the mountain rills as they splashed past his front door, down to the swelling Grotavask. Neither would he stand on his porch in the clear, dark spring nights and see the lights in the sky, the shimmering northern lights that had been there since his boyhood, not the guttering, sickly flares now playing about the dark face of Stormspike. Such things were gone now. His road ahead was plain, but there was little joy in it. But not everything was clear, even now. There was still the nagging dream to be dealt with, the dream of the Black Book and the 3 swords. It had dogged his sleep for a fortnight, but its meaning was still hidden from him. His thoughts were interrupted by a blotch of movement on the southern approach, far away along the rim of trees dotting the Weldhelm's western skirts. He squinted briefly, then slowly nodded his head and rose to his feet. As he was pulling his coat back on, the wind changed direction. A moment later, a dim mutter of thunder rolled down from the north. It came again, a low growl like a beast struggling awake from sleep. On its heels, but from the opposite direction, the sound of hooves grew from a murmur to a noise that rivaled the thunder. As Yarnauga picked up his cage of birds and walked out to meet the riders, the sounds grew together. Thunder tolling in the north, the muffled din of approaching horsemen to the south, until they filled the white forest with their cold rumble, like music made on drums of ice. And I was just about right. 13 after. So, with that, I am wrapping it up for this morning's reading. Thank you for joining me. I hope we now have the sound fixed, or at least dealt with. Anyway. Oh dear, sounds like it started again. Anyway, well, I'll continue trying to figure it out. Y'all be good. I will talk to you soon. I'm going to zip off now. So take good care of yourselves. Take good care of your loved ones, family, friends, everybody. And I will talk to you really soon. Sorry, don't know why we're having sound problems, except just that possibly everything is screwed up and I'm going to need another adapter or two. Anyway, I'll try to figure it out. Talk to you soon. Thank you for joining me. Have fun. Bye. Peace.